How many of you have the right side? Do you know why? It's what? No, this still exists.
One have to hit the 57 to get it.
I have 3 kids, 15, 12, and 6. Imagine the 6-year-olds pouring ketchup using this thing. Can you imagine that? That's glass, right? And this is plastic.
We did it.
We all did it, but what happened?
You gotta teach them to hit the 57.
So my job is to try and make people feel better when they use technology. This is not technology, this is just a nice example that I like to use, but user experience, a lot of people, including my mom still today, I've been doing that for 20 years, she still doesn't understand what I do. This is how I explain it. User experience is how people feel when they use something, anything. So yeah, I was with Google for 7 years, mostly on Google search. I was involved in a lot of things. How many of you have a computer you talk to at home? Whatever it is, Alexa, Google Home. How many of you talk to your phone? Not for a conversation, but for a conversation with a machine. Okay, so I was involved in that at Google. Funny story about that. I joined that team at first. It was 4 people, 4 engineers and I. And they were first beginning to create that thing. This is long before even Apple's Siri and before people talk to computers. And I tried it a lot. I took it home and I tried it a lot, and it didn't recognize my speech. And I came back to the team and I told them, you know, Google engineers, they're really proud of their craft. And I told them, listen, it just doesn't work. It doesn't recognize my speech. And they were somewhat embarrassed, but in the end they said it. Said, you know, you're an Israeli. You have an accent. We're not very good with accents, so it's probably your accent. We'll make it better, but it's not now, but it's probably your accent. After a year, I noticed a significant change. And I told them, came back to them and said, great job. And what are you talking about? You improved speech recognition. They're like, no, we worked on other things. It's probably your accent getting better. So that I was involved in. I only gave the example of sports, but I had the privilege of working on search results, for the experience of consuming search results for sports and movies and TV and personas, personalities, and weather, and I'm forgetting probably 14 other fields, but that took me all over the world, from sports bars in New York City with Arsenal fans watching games, and me and my friends from Google watching them without them knowing, and what they do on their phones. Not recording anything, just watching. And to the slums of Jakarta, Indonesia, where we met people at their homes that were probably less than the size of this stage, and talk with them about how they consume information online and on their phones, bless you. And it was really a great experience. Along the way, I published these 2 books. I'm not trying to sell it to you because you're probably not in my field, but just know about that. That's fine. My publishers will be angry with me, but that's fine. This one is the one, this is for people like me. This is for anybody who has an idea for a product. This is how to validate your ideas using techniques from user experience research. Then I was head of user experience at WeWork that had a very unique approach to work. If you can see, usually we say, thank God it's Friday. WeWork has a mantra, thank God it's Monday, because you're happy to come to something like that you call work. This is WeWork, one of the buildings in Shanghai. And now I'm with Goldman Sachs, celebrating a year there in 2 weeks. A company that celebrates 150 years this year. And decided a couple of years ago to go to the consumer market and realize that user experience is something that is extremely important once you do that. So this is my past. What I want to do today is talk briefly about 5 principles of user experience and kind of expose you to some of the things that I care about, that I deal with, and that I hope through these books and through my talks and through everything I do to affect people to do better. So this is principle number 1. For some of them, I just picked and choose because there's so many great ones. This is Google's, I don't know if you know, Google's 10 things we know to be true. So this is thing number 1. And I have the link here, and I'll give you in the end the link to this entire deck so you can use it, access it. Focus on the user and all else will follow. And I truly, truly believe in that. The truth is out there. People from the startup world now know to say something that falls along the lines of this, get out of the building. The truth is not in front of you, in front of your computer. The truth is out there with people who are actually going to use whatever it is that you're coming up with. In many cases, unfortunately, what happens is this. People perfectly execute the wrong plan. And I'll explain what I mean by that. We have a great idea. Somebody has a great idea. And today people know that design is important, especially visual design and the aesthetic of things. So they create and build, let's say, beautiful apps for your phones. And they know that usability, the study of usability is really important, so you can actually know what you're doing and know what to click on. People know now that this is important. They invest in that. So they build beautiful and usable products and apps that nobody needs because they fail to learn from their users, to focus on their users first. I gave an entire talk. The most nerve-wracking talk I ever gave in my life was that Google has an annual conference called Google I/O, broadcast live to millions of people around the world. So this is my talk there. I titled it Perfectly Executing the Wrong Plan. You can watch it there. My field has all kinds of different names, and these are some names from the history. It's not a new field. We're not doctors. We're not in existence for many thousands of years, but several dozens of years. It was first called MMI. It probably goes back to World War I, where pilots, instead of firing, they ejected themselves out of the airplane. And then people said, we need to think about humans and what they know and what they understand and how human it is to err. So let's think about that and design things for machines to work better with humans and vice versa. So man-machine interface. And then somebody thought, well, it's not just men, it's also women, so let's call it computer-human interaction. And then somebody said, but the human is more important, so let's switch that. So human-computer interaction. And you see academic programs titled HCI and CHI still today. Something that stuck, it's not close to OCD, it's UCD, user-centered design. User-centered design. And from that, you probably hear, I went to a certain clinic with one of my kids, and then I saw patient-centered whatever. So it stuck with a lot of other fields, but user-centered design, and then user experience and so on. I went to school in Bentley University in Massachusetts, and the program was called Human Factors in Information Design, which they admit now is a bad name for user experience. But these are the terminology. This is the terminology that people had at the time. I want us to play a game, okay? You need to identify the product by its features. I'm going to expose features of a certain product. If you know the product or think you know the product, it's nothing tricky here. Raise your hand, okay? You all ready? Number 1. Okay. You don't need to say. Just if you're really sure, raise your hand. Number 3. Okay. Number 4. And number 5. All right. Now I'm going to show you 2 goals that people have when they use this product. Okay? Not features of the product, but goals of humans using this product. Okay. Funny, right? But this is my life. What happens here is how people who work on creating and building technology, this is how they think. This is how they trained all of you to think. Because when you, for example, well, today we don't buy cameras, but we buy phones, okay? So when you are going to buy a phone, if you're not like me that just buys an iPhone and that's it, you compare, you look at lists of features. You don't even have these available, goals. All right? Oh, this camera is better because it has 12x or whatever. I know nothing about cameras, but we look at features, and developers, the engineers that build these products, they also build by features. And you compare lists of features if you compare different products. What I'm saying, what my field is focused on is this. First of all, uncovering these. What is it? What are those needs that we humans have? And then designing products that meet those needs and making sure that our products indeed solve these needs. So that was principle number one, follow the user, focus on the user, and all else will follow. Number two, I know it's going to sound weird, but at least my first rule of research with humans is to never, ever listen to them. This is actually not a trick. I'm very, very serious about that.
How does your wife feel about that?
So I changed for this talk, actually. I'm not avoiding the question. Usually I write here, don't listen to users. I just feel that the word user is so, my field and you know, the drug business is the only businesses that use users as the word to describe their audience. But I prefer people. But what I mean are people who are using technology. My wife would want me to listen. Instead, observe their behavior. So there's a second part here. Behavior is much more telling than what people say. And I would say more than that. The worst thing that you can do is ask people about their behavior. Because, and again, we're not human nature, we're not bad people. We don't want to lie to you. But we tell different stories that are not necessarily true. We want to be perceived as good people, helpful. And we think, specifically in a situation of research where you know the person is trying to learn something from you, you want to be helpful. So you think, it's all unconscious. You think, what can you say to be helpful or be perceived as helpful? I'll give you two examples for studies that show that there's really no strong positive connection between, we call it attitude and behavior. So the first one is a study from 1937. So researchers went to many, many schools in the US, and they did that with dozens of thousands of people and with their teachers that were involved, of course. And they asked them, in a survey, they asked them about their attitude toward cheating in exams and got their answers. And a few weeks after, again, with the schools, with the teachers, they put these same students in a situation where they had an opportunity to cheat without getting caught. The details don't matter here, but they were put in that position. And there was no positive correlation at all between what they said about cheating and how they acted. So that's from 1937. So people, when I share that, people say, oh, well, that's old news. I don't know how long that is, 80 years ago. Human behavior changes. Well, I can argue and I can stand here for 4 hours and explain why human behavior has not really changed in the past 10,000 years. But for those who are skeptical, here's a study from a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, published on the BBC. So researchers in the UK, for whatever reason, I think it's to prove that point, that there's a difference between attitude and behavior, went to public bathrooms in gas stations, okay? And they asked people coming out of the bathrooms did you wash your hands after you finished your business? And guess what? 99% of people said, yes, I did. But the researchers also installed sensors on the faucets, and they actually knew how many people washed their hands. So men, brace yourself. 64% of men, 32% of men and 64% of women actually wash their hands. So again, it's not because we want to lie. We want to be perceived as helpful, good people, smart people. So we have no idea. The bottom line is that we have no idea how to describe our behavior. And the one thing that we should do, knowing that, and there were studies about that, the connection, the relationship between attitude and behavior, because it's so unbelievable. Studies about that have been happening still today throughout these 80, 100 years, and they all prove the same point. No strong relationship between the two. Be very well aware of that. In my world, I worked, I'm not going to name names, I worked in a company where a good process was touring between our top 15 clients and asking them, what do you want us to develop for you in our product? This was good, okay? But again, it's not going to give you the products that people actually need. So that was number 2, observe human behavior. Number 3, this is a strong one. Learn rather than make stuff. A lot of people have this approach. Let's build stuff. Let's create stuff. Let's just launch it and make it available. And that's our unit of progress. Heck, at Google, we had, at some point, we had a person who had the role, a job title, I kid you not, the launch czar. And that person sent an email to all of Google once a month. Here are the things that we launched in the past month. At some point, Google decided to cancel that thing. And Google realized a few years back now, the quality is now more important than just making stuff. And to get high quality products, you need to learn. The progressive unit is what we learn, not what we make necessarily. So this is where I try to go not too deep into kind of my field and what all of that actually means. Some people call this process design thinking. I just prefer thinking, but whatever it is, whatever we call it, it starts by understanding your audience, empathizing with them. So going to Jakarta, for example, sitting on the floor and talking with that person. And that person specifically was a blogger, not even a blogger. She was, we walked with her. She goes to her neighbors every week and collects different magazines and collects news about celebrities from all over and creates a newsletter that she sends to people who are interested. So we needed to learn and empathize with her. What is she going through to make all of that happen? And then we can collect all of our findings and define what are the problems that we see exist, what are the needs of people that we've identified. And then we come up with ideas. What are ideas that might, some call them bets, some call them guesses, some call them guesstimates. We have a lot of ways to describe these, but these are not final solutions. These are just ideas that we have for things that might meet those needs that we identified and might solve these problems that we show. Then we build prototypes, and then we test these prototypes again and again and again and again and again with people to see first if indeed that solution of ours solves the problems that we identified, and the usability part. Can they actually work through that thing? Once we know all of that, we can go to implementation. While in a lot of companies that have no idea what this process is about, they start with implementation. I have an idea. I work a lot with startup founders. So a lot of them tell me that they have lists of products that someday they will make happen. I admire the two that I met so far in my life that said that they have a list of problems they want to solve. They don't know what their solutions are, but they are interested in the problems. And this is really, really important. I really encourage people to first fall in love with the problem rather than falling in love with the solution. This is one example for something that we do in those tests. At Google, we call it a percent experiment. Other names for it is A/B test or split test. The idea is very simple. Let's say you have a website. Let's say you have this website. Let's say somebody has an idea that if we change the design of this website to something like that, more people will click on ads and we'll make more money for ourselves and our advertisers. Let's say that's an idea. So we can put 15 people in a room and have a, I don't know, $400,000 meeting and talk about whether this is a good idea or bad idea. Instead, what we do is we launch this thing to a small percent of the population. So one day, most people see this, but some people, and for Google with, I don't know, 2 billion users a day, so you can get a pretty nice sample size if you launch this to a small percentage of the population and compare clicks on ads. If this will generate more clicks on ads, believe me, this is how the Google website would look like. And this is done every day. Hundreds of these are being done every day by Google, by Facebook, by Twitter, by Instagram, by all the things that you use, the serious ones at least. And we test by that, we test human behavior. Does behavior change or not? All right, number 4, do less. This is really, really important. I'm going to show you 2 websites as fast as I can. And you need to tell me, raise your hand with 1 or 2 and tell me which website is easier to use. Not more beautiful, not fancier, easier to use. Okay? I'll try to do that really fast. 1 or 2? 2. So first of all, just so you know, I'll do it again. So these were Yahoo from 1998 and Google from 1998 when it first launched. Today they look a little bit different. Yahoo, this is from this morning, and Google. So a few things here. First, what I did with you, that fast thing, I'm not fast enough, but this is going to your pre-attentive processing. We have, there's no second chance to make a first impression. That's exactly that, and it's proven. It takes us under 250 milliseconds, a quarter of a second, to make an impression, to decide what's our impression when we see something, anything. So it doesn't take a lot of time for people to understand if this is going to be hard to use or easy to use. So it's all based on these experiments and this knowledge. There's a concept in my field called an MVP. Who thinks they know what's an MVP? Okay, cool. It's not that. All right. It's a minimum viable product. It's the minimum amount of effort required to achieve the maximum amount of learning. So we try to do the smallest thing we can do to learn something. We learn something, great, we move on. Okay? So we do less. We don't build the whole thing, launch it and see what happens. We build a small thing, learn from that, iterate, and move forward. And lastly, include everyone. New York City decided several years back to lower the curbs when in front of crossing walks. And recently, you see these things as well. Do you know what these are? This is from downstairs. I took it this morning. This is for blind so blind, the idea is that when you step on this, you feel the surface is different and you know you're about to cross a street. And as opposed to this one that's gray, if you have a hard time seeing, you're not completely blind, you start seeing these very colorful ones. So you see red, you see white, you see yellow. These are to help you even if you can't see something. So the funny thing about these, especially because of the lowering of the curbs, is that it works great for a lot of other people who are not necessarily using wheelchairs, because this was done to help people with wheelchairs cross the street. Surprisingly, the city learned that people with kids' baby strollers are having a better time crossing streets. Rollerbladers at the time, skateboarders today. That helps a lot of other people. And that actually applies to technology as well. When we make technology more accessible to people with difficulties, we make it better for everybody. And this is also proven, and we learned that a long time ago. Today in some countries, including this one, there are some laws that make you do that, but you can always make it better or worse. So in my field at least, the ones that are serious about it, they know that if you include everybody, you make everybody happy, not just people with certain capabilities.